Hello everyone, it's Hayden from Arsenal Pass here with the third in a series of deck profile videos in collaboration with Legend Story Studios with two other Nationals winners, in fact a 2x national winner in the form of Tarek Patel and Yuki Lee Bender, already providing two very awesome deck profile videos that you can go and check out at fabtcg.com. I'm here with the third installment in this national season with a Viserai deck profile, looking at a list that I think is particularly good in this classic constructed meta as we move through the end of national season and I guess towards what is looking like the first World Championship. I think a list that is great to take to anywhere from local armories to even I think in with a shout at the World Championships based on this current meta. So we'll get into that shortly. Do just want to talk a little bit about, I guess, this national season. It's been such an exciting national season. We've already seen 2 weeks as I record this video. It's the week of US Nationals, about to dive into US Nationals, New Zealand Nationals, Polish Nationals, some really big national championships. Excited to see how it shakes out. In terms of where Viserai stands, I think we continue to see it in the top sort of 5 decks being played, top 5 heroes played in this classic constructed meta, and we'll see if it can take another win or two this coming weekend. So let's take a look at a slightly different take and a twist on what is Viserai, I think, in this current meta. Let's dive straight into this Viserai deck profile with the core of the deck laid out here in front of us. So this is pretty traditional, what you'll see with a lot of Viserai decks in this meta. It's 50 cards here laid out in front of us, and first thing you'll notice is the 9 Mothering Skies. Really common, a big power part of what you're trying to do in Viserai in this format is play a Mothering Skies, play an attack action, getting go again, pitching your blue card, and then coming in with one of the key cards in the deck, of course, Rosetta Thorn, one of the power elements of what you can do with Viserai in this format. In terms of the other cards that are laid out here in front of us, so of course we have things like Revel in the Runeblood, Mordred. These cards are going to power really big arcane damage turns alongside our attack actions. Again, 9 of in the Shrill of the Skull form, such a powerful card that can really help to threaten and work so well in pairing with Mothering Skies to threaten those big damage turns. You know, off a blue, a Shrill, and a Mothering Skies, we can presenting, you know, upwards of 14, 15 damage off 3 cards really easily, and at awkward breakpoints that's going to be difficult for the opponent to deal with. So there we have it. One of the cards I'm a really big fan of is Vexing Malice. A lot of other versions might run cards like Meet and Greet or Spellblade Strike. For me, Vexing Malice, and there's another big reason we play Vexing Malice, which we'll get to in a minute once we touch on sort of sideboard options and packages that we have within this deck. But within the main sort of core 50 of any kind of Viserai deck, I think at the moment, Vexing Malice is a really good option. What it's going to do is help you keep around one of your most important cards, I think, in this current meta, just due to its raw power in the form of Spellbound Creepers. So that 2 arcane damage, definitely nothing to scoff at, and a really important card. And then we have, you know, ways to get go again in the form of our attack actions with Swarming Gloomveil. Look at the resource cards. All pretty standard here. You can see, again, we talked about the Mothering Skies already. To lead the charge, another way to enable us to get go again and power those kind of Shrill the Skull form, Spellblade Assault turns that we just talked about. Become the Arknight, a utility search tutor card that we can use when we need to, you know, pair things and find things like a Mordred Tide, a Revel in Runeblood, or perhaps a Mothering Skies or a Shrill to pair with one or the other. Otherwise, just some really good solid blue attack actions that defend 3, pitch well, and if we do draw too many blues, because we do like blues in this deck, you can see even in the core here, you know, we're running up to 21 blues here. We want to make sure that we have, you know, access to turn our blues into some good damage in the form of the Shrill and the Spellblade Assault. And then I choose to play 2 Consuming Volition. I think there's kind of this extra attack action slot to balance out the non-attack actions and attack actions, because we do want to be playing close to a 50-50 split in our attack actions and non-attack actions in basically every single matchup, and where we can, because of cards like, well, primarily because of a card in the form of Sonara Canax, which is so strong, especially into, you know, slower, more grindier decks when you can really dump resources into it. You want to make sure you're hitting as many cards as possible. I like Consuming Volition because I think it's something that pairs well with another package that we have in this deck, but it was also just good in a format where disruptive on-hit effects are really powerful. Otherwise, if we look to the equipment and what we have available, of course, we talked about already, Rosetta Thorn, the cornerstone of what you're trying to do in a Viserai deck at the moment. It's, you know, a non-attack action, attack action, which gets you go again into the threat of Rosetta Thorn, is just a really, really strong 3-card hand. So Mothering Skies, Shrill, pitching the blue, and then that leftover resource for Rosetta Thorn is really big, and a big part of what we're trying to do, I think, in any Viserai deck right now, but particularly in this deck, is end the turn by swinging that Rosetta Thorn, 1 resource, 4 damage split across 2 sources, and that's going to help us, of course, that 2 arcane damage, keep around another cornerstone of the deck, in the form of Spellbound Creepers. So one of the more powerful things I think you can be doing, one of the most powerful cards printed right now, is Spellbound Creepers. So having access to this card is going to allow us to do some pretty crazy things, especially when we start to think about, playing Movrian Skies at instant speed to be able to play 2 attack actions plus our Rosetta Thorn in a single turn. And of course, with the amount of blues that we do have in this deck, really easy to continue to do things like that. So Spellbound Creepers, a really important part. That's another reason I like these 1-cost attack actions. Just works a bit better with the cost structure of something like Spellbound Creepers. If we think, okay, we come in, start the turn with a Vixie Malice, pitching a blue card, we can activate our Spellbound Creepers using our second resource on our blue, so we can leave with 1 resource afterwards, play something like the Sonata Arcanics, maybe to dig up a card to put in Arsenal, or one of these other non-attack actions we have. If we're on a 5-card hand, we can do some pretty crazy stuff with Movrian Skies off that, then come in with something like another Vixie Malice or a Spellblade Assault, and then use our equipment piece, our chest equipment piece, maybe in the form of a Tunic in some of these slower matchups, which we do have access to come in with that Rosetta Thorn. So really sort of efficient cost structure there, and Spellbound Creepers really enables us to sort of do that. Other options out of the sideboard that are sort of in our equipment suite that we do have. Next one I'll talk about is kind of the default, I think, right now is Aether Ironweave, and I'm a really big fan of Aether Ironweave. I really like that majority of Viserai builds have gone to this card. That sort of ability to use 2 resources at some point during the game. A lot of, still a lot of quicker, you don't really get to 7 turns in a lot of matchups in this current format still, although you do, and we do have an option in the sideboard for that. But in these matchups that are a lot faster, aggro mirrors, even into the more aggressive ultims that we're seeing now, I think a card like Aether Ironweave is super, super valuable to just on demand when you go for this big turn, get those 2 big resources as opposed to maybe 1 resource at one point. Of course, really important that you can also defend with it and then use the resources afterwards. Has a lot of value you can get out of Aether Ironweave in a deck like this, especially with a big Mordred or Revel turn when you're on 5 cards. Then you've got the Grasp of the Arknight, just a really good defensive piece that has some utility to dump resources into. Of course, we do play so many blues. It's not hard to activate the Grasp, and often we're doing it for some really good value with things like Swarming Gloomveil, Mordred Tide, of course. And then last but certainly not least is one of the newest additions, of course, to the standard format, and what we're seeing with Viserai in particular, I think is a really big upgrade in the headpiece over something like a Arcanized Skullcap, is Crown of Providence. With a 50-50 mix of attack actions and non-attack actions and needing both to work, as is Runeblade Life, Crown of Providence is a really important card to help filter that out. I've drawn the all-attack action hand or the all-non-attack action hand, and Crown of Providence is a really good way to help filter those and find maybe the attack action you need or the non-attack action you need, or just fix the hand for resources, tuck an extra blue that you don't need, things like that. Really good, I think, around playing around power cards, a card that's particularly good into and disrupting your 5-card hands in the form of Command & Conquer. So a big fan of that. That's the 50-card core. Now I'm going to sort of flip over and talk about some of the packages that we have in the sideboard for dealing with different matchups and how this deck can kind of move from more of a traditional Viserai deck to something that I think can deal with really popular options in this meta, particularly in the form of ice decks, Iyslander being the primary candidate there, and Dramai. Now, while the 50 cards that we just saw, the core of that Viserai deck remains relatively unchanged from matchup to matchup, sans a few tweaks here and there to fix up ratios and numbers. Where the fun comes in is adding those extra cards in to make up the full 60 and have a package that's going to give you the ability to really play a certain way, play a certain game plan, and there's a couple of options here, or attack what your opponent is doing. So the first one, the one that I think is a little bit spicy, and we've seen it before, and I've talked about it on the Arsenal Pass channel and videos done in the past, but I think now in particular is a really good time for this package, is this Belittle Minnowism package that we have on the left-hand side here. Now, the reason that I think this is quite good in this meta is that extra resources and ways to tutor it up with a first attack in the form of Belittle are really strong, particularly into Iyslander, where they're trying to tax your hand and trying to deal you away from cards. Now, if you come in directly with a Belittle as the first action, it doesn't give your Viserai, your Iyslander opponent the opportunity to disrupt you from Arsenal with a particular card. Flip that Channel Lake Frigid immediately, flip the Aether Ice Vein, do these other disruptive effects until you've already got an attack about to hit the combat chain, and also you going to search up potentially a blue Minnowism to get extra resources, or just more damage if they don't have that hand in the form of red Minnowism. So I think Belittle right now particularly very strong. Also very good into decks like Dromai. You just get to go wider on the combat chain, deal with the dragons that you do need to, but present damage. The other thing with Belittle is that a 1 for 6 is just always a good rate. Now, the weakness and the downside is the defensive capability of a 2 block in the form of Belittle. And especially when we're seeing, these more sort of aggressive ultims come in and maybe disruptive elements where, especially with choke slams and things like that, where red minimalism might not be quite as ideal. So this is a package that can come into the deck. It's a smaller package than I've played in the past with minimalism Belittle packages where I've played up to 6 Belittles and, sort of 7 or I guess 6, 5, 6 minimalisms, and then, 6 Belittles. But now we're really distilled down to a pretty efficient package that just allows us to add a bit of an injection of that kind of go wide and extra resource fuel. The other thing I really like about the Belittle minimalism package is that, yes, they are generics, but minimalism actually is a non-attack action that's going to help you turn on that Viserai ability and is a perfect target for creepers, which we talked about before, allowing you to get those really big combat chains, massive 5-card hands. Really strong package there. Now we have these 2 Arcanic Crackles which go hand in hand with this package. One thing I really like about Arcanic Crackle, again, that creeper is so important, and Arcanic Crackle is a card that has split damage and enables you to keep that creepers or force your opponent to have to deal with the issue of blocking physical and arcane damage to even try and prevent that and stop that. So Arcanic Crackle is a card I really like. It also defends 3, which is huge in this meta right now, and it allows us to have a few more extra 3 reveals for Belittle. I think Arcanic Crackle has some good abilities and is a reasonable card, but I wouldn't play it if it wasn't for Belittle, so we stick with 2 here. Moving on to the right, we look at what I call our disruptive package in the form of Erase Face and Command and Conquer. Erase Face particularly really strong into decks like Aggro Boost Dash, the Mirror for turning off Movrian Sky's turns, and you can also use it into even the Ice decks in a pinch if you need to, if your configuration is a little bit different, but I think primarily those 2 decks, Boost Dash and the Mirror, are very important, and Erase Face does a really good job there. Command and Conquer, really strong into one of our worst matchups in the form of Lexi. It's also really good into aggro decks that want to set up 5-card hands, so Fire's a particular good example, I think, where they often want to set an Arsenal card up. Command and Conquer can do a lot of work there, and just allows us to have another disruptive element to side into that 50-card core. Next on the right, we've got what I would say is a slower, grindier sort of package, but I'll talk a little bit about the equipment first. And talked about Iyslander with this Belittle minimalism package, and Crown of Dichotomy is a card that goes hand in hand with that. Now, I don't think in particular that blocking arcane damage is actually the way to beat Iyslander. I think you can't play on Iyslander's terms. You've got to play on your own terms and be quite aggressive, and you're really just trying to get through those on-hit effects. So we played the 1 Arcane Barrier, but we don't go away from sort of our chest piece. We don't go for a Nullrune Robe. We don't go for particularly a different set of gloves, because what we're looking to actually do is prevent maybe 1 arcane damage, but pay the 2 resources for the Aether Ice Vein or the Insidious Chill, and then using Tunic to get a value on that Tunic, get that counter up to 3, and that really turns off their ability to Coronet Peek us and take away our big hands. So Tunic and Crown of Dichotomy for that matchup, and Crown of Dichotomy otherwise not really being used into the other aggro, so the Runeblade decks. You go without. You don't really need the Arcane Barrier. What's gonna hurt you, what's gonna kill you, and what you have to race and deal with is the physical damage, those on-hit effects. So the Crown of Providence, too important there. Tunic, also where it's really great, not just against Iyslander, but these grindier matchups, Ultim in particular, especially if you see any of these slower Ultim decks, Tunic is really valuable. So let's move through onto the right and talk about, what else sort of comes in to make that package for, a slower or even a mid-range sort of matchup. Now, Arknight Shard is a particularly powerful card, but it doesn't defend. So against aggressive decks, lower value, but against non-aggressive decks and decks where you get to use your resources and you're going to be doing something every turn, or you're going to be pitching to Crown of Dichotomy potentially. Arknight Shard, very powerful as effectively 3 resources plus that one Rune Chant token. And if you have Mordred tied out, get 2. Rune Flash. Now, I really like Rune Flash, and I'm often playing at least 1 in the deck. The issue I have with Rune Flash is this deck isn't particularly wanting to hold Rune Chants. It's wanting to, kind of spray them at the opponent pretty quickly. So often you can draw Rune Flash and not be able to do anything with it. But where you can really set up 5-card hands, that's where this card shows its true power, because you can always make sure it's a 0 for 4, which is it's what you want to do. You never want to pay resources for this card. And then we have some ways to make some Rune Chants. We've got 3 Rune Blood Incantation and 1 Read the Runes. Now, reason for playing this kind of split is Runeblood Incantation allows us to keep that tempo plan. We never want to take our foot off the gas, even against these reactive, sort of a bit slower, grindier, mid-range decks or control decks, as you might want to say. Runeblood Incantation allows us to play the non-attack action and get a generation of rune chants on the board without giving up that tempo, whereas Read the Runes requires us to end the combat chain. So this card is particularly really saucy and spicy when you pair it with Mordred Tide, but you don't want to see too many of these. And of course, you can go and find this with our tutor, Become the Arknight, particularly if you've set up a Mordred Tide turn. That's fantastic. And then we have another copy of Rattlebones, which just allows us to get threat density back into the deck, especially in some of the grindier decks. You know, you can go and get a Rune Flash if you've got a great setup. You can go and get another Swarming Gloomveil, which is the best target. You have a blue plus a Rattlebones and a Swarming Gloomveil in the graveyard. You know, you're presenting good damage off that. Pitch the blue, play the Rattlebones, get the Swarming Gloomveil back. You know, you're already coming in for 3 with Go Again, plus the Rune Chant, and then another 4 afterwards. So minimum 7 just allows you to keep tempo. And of course, if you get to it in a bigger hand, even more damage coming in. So outside of that, that's basically the extra cards and the options that you have available in this kind of Viserai deck that I'm looking at. Again, as I say, I think the Belittle package, it's time to shine. It's in a really good spot right now, but where previous Viserai decks maybe have played a true core Belittle version, this uses a package as a kind of a pre-board, an option you don't have to always play, particularly into matchups where that 2 block is really going to hurt you, or you don't have the time to set it up, or it's not quite going to do the job you need, such as into matchups like, into Ultim, such as matchups like that, where they can really punish that Minnowism as well, and the massive 2 blocks. So there we have it. That's my Viserai take for this current meta with a Belittle package. I'm excited to see, you know, people pick it up and play it and see how it goes. And if you want a few tips for playing Viserai, I think it's a really great sort of place to start. It's a deck that can have pretty even matchups across the field. You know, it's really hard to find a truly bad matchup for Viserai right now, except for maybe these heavy Ice Lexi decks. But otherwise, you've got game into pretty much everything, which is awesome. And you have some fantastic options at your disposal. So many ways to build Viserai right now, but this is my particular favorite right now. So big shout out to fabtcg.com and Legend Story Studios for collabing with us on this. I've been Hayden from Arsenal Pass, and we'll see you next time.